Good day, everyone. My name is Joe Pecorino, and I am with the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. I would like to, on behalf of the Southern District of New York, as well as all the sponsoring courts throughout the country, we would like to welcome you to the 2024 Power Act event. To begin things, I'd like to introduce the Chief Judge for the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, Laura Taylor Swain. Your Honor.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Taylor Swain, the Chief Judge of the District Court for the Southern District of New York, and I welcome you all warmly on behalf of all of the Chief Judges of each of our participating courts. The Power Act gives the federal courts the opportunity each year to focus on the issues facing survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and stalking, and the opportunity of legal professionals through pro bono service to make a difference in the lives of survivors. We in the federal courts do not, because of our jurisdictional areas, see many such cases. So our encounters with people who are living through these issues and finding ways to advocate and help open our eyes wider, sharpen our hearing, and we hope inspire members of the bar who are not yet familiar with opportunities to do needed work in these areas to learn more and seek them out comes in settings like this. Our speakers include women who have survived assaults and who advocate for themselves and others in a variety of ways. They will bravely and generously share their stories and their visions with us. And we will also be hearing from a citizen of Muskogee Creek Nation who has spent over a decade working as an advocate, organizer, founder, and lawyer for the rights of Indigenous people, both in Oklahoma and nationally. It'll be an informative and inspiring hour. And for those of you who are participating for CLE credit, we will be showing a CLE code word twice during the hour, so keep an eye out for that code word when it's displayed. I will now introduce our first speaker, Trina Clemons. Ms. Clemons' diverse career path follows a common thread, a deep curiosity about people and complex systems, coupled with a propensity to make and create. Her journey began in ballet studios and evolved to roles in advertising, consulting, and education. Her decades-long legal journey to hold an immigrant aggravated felon accountable, supported by dozens of family members, friends, and state, federal, and international legal and social service professionals, informs her to this day, but has never defined her. Ms. Clemons, I turn it over to you. Ms. Clemons, are you on yet?
Chief, she just sent me an email. She's having difficulty. She can speak.
I'm here.
She is. All right.
Oh, great.
Sorry, everybody. I'm having techie glitches. So are we ready?
Yes, we are ready, and you're just coming into focus now. Joe, do you want to pin the image? Can you do that? Well, Ms. Clemons, I've just introduced you, and here you are, pinned and all. So please go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Apologies. I'm having some tech issues. Hi there. I'm Trina, and I'm pleased to be joining you today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my stories. So what happened to me? This is kind of the question to kick it off. My legal journey began in 1991 with a call from an estranged friend. She had told me that she understood why just 18 months earlier, at the age of 17, I had abruptly and pretty inexplicably walked away from a promising career as a ballet dancer. And when she'd reached out, we really hadn't talked for quite a while. And as we caught up, we realized we had a common fear of our coach and his relentless abuse. And for her, it was continuing. And for me, it had continued even at a distance when I had moved hundreds of miles away to try to get away from him. And we realized over that conversation that he'd really orchestrated this rift between us so we wouldn't make those connections. And we realized pretty quickly that what had happened to us had likely happened before and would continue. And feeling as though we really had no choice, but we really needed to act. The thought of not acting scared us. We reached out to our parents, and we were pretty young at that point. We were 18, 19. And ironically, our coach had really taught us what to do through our training. We knew we had to take small steps. We knew we had to stay dedicated, and we knew we had to be willing to try and fail. And we also knew we could do hard things. So the qualities he'd put into us through our training, our stamina, our creativity, and our discipline really prepared us for the challenge ahead. What we didn't really understand was the daunting balancing act that we were confronted with, that we needed to trust ourselves and that we needed to stay naive enough to believe that our drive could carry us through. And we also were pretty clueless about the justice system. We really had no idea what we were in for. So after talking to our parents, both of us reached out to the police, the local police, and then social services as well. But for 8 years, really nothing happened. From what we understood, our coach was intermittently questioned, but the enablers, his social connections and the power that he had was slowly eroding. But for us at the time, it didn't feel that way. There were patterns that things were changing, but they were really kind of slow. They were barely recognizable. But eventually in 1999, I think, so between the complaints to police and social services, public prosecutors became interested in our cases. There were a lot of us, but at the time they decided to pursue 3 cases, and mine was among them. I don't really understand why the 3 they chose were those 3, because as I said, there were a lot more young women involved in this pattern of abuse. But our coach was arrested in May of 1999, and the trial started in the spring of 2000, with convictions in December of 2000 and then April of 2001. And then by 2004, there was a federal case that was conducted over closed circuit from the prison, which we did not know about until after the fact. And during that trial, he was convicted as an immigrant aggravated felon, and to be banned and deported upon his release. That was scheduled for July of 2014. And so in about 2008, the first parole hearing approached, and I got back on the phone. I was trying to understand, what was happening, what had been his progression through the prison system. Had he been taking any courses? Had he demonstrated any sense of remorse? Did he understand the impact he had had? Was there any hint that he had shown any growth? And all the answers that came back to me were no. None of these things seemed to have been happening. So it was also during the course of those conversations I came to realize that his coaching protege, so he was not only coaching dancers, but he was also coaching future coaches, had been arrested, convicted, and tried of the same behavior he had. So I just at that point was like, I'm fighting this tooth and nails at every parole hearing I can go to. So starting in 2009, being as informed as I could, I started participating in parole hearings and really remained adamant that he serve his full sentence. In early 2013, kind of a year before his release, I reached out to ICE, Immigration Control and Enforcement, and shared a case number, which to me, I was like, I had this magic number, my name. If I said my name and I gave them that number, like all kinds of things would start happening. I don't know what system they had, either, ICE or federal employees or state employees, but this number and my name really would result in action, and people would say, how can I help you? What can I do? So I really streamlined any time that I called for information. But it was during that call to ICE that I somehow got connected to a deportation officer named Carlos. And Carlos gave me his cell phone number and I gave him mine. And when my coach was out of the country, he called me and said, everything has been finished, and Carlos was back on his way to the United States. But prior to that scheduled deportation, I had realized that we had a new challenge, which was our coach, while designated an aggravated immigrant felon in the United States, was going home to a very different legal system, one where the age of consent had remained at 14 years old for nearly a century. So realizing that this country's approach to rehabilitation and managing offenders was really a privacy-focused approach, that his and the age of consent was much younger there, that the seriousness of the crimes for which he was convicted, A, might not even be known, and B, maybe not even register with some in his home country. So I connected, upon realizing this, started doing some research, and I connected to the former director of the International Social Services at Johns Hopkins University. And I learned about international public service announcements and worked with ISS to issue PSAs in his home country, and have done that on a couple occasions when press, he's a relatively well-known figure in the ballet world. When the press would come up and I would see his name, I would recite PSAs. But you know, I actually rarely talk about case. I kind of feel, while this case number and my name, I'm seen and I'm validated, there's a lot of women who are not, who are connected to this case and have endured more than I have, and really don't have the power of having a name and a case number. And they've endured more than I have. And I've kind of realized by past experiences, when I do have talked about this case, when it's not connected to purpose or curiosity, that sometimes I'm met with apathy or even silence. And that's how I interpret it. And I might wrongly interpret it. But I think that feeling of lack of interest, lack of curiosity, inaction, apathy hurts even more. And I can only imagine that the women who don't have these case numbers and this name that associated with these convictions that I do, that's really hard for them. So I was asked also how I heal. So my entire journey, I really have healed by being a collaborator and a challenger. Entangled in my story, there's an unknown story of a little boy who grew up impoverished in an unstable environment with gender inequality in the 50s and 60s. And so I had to kind of figure out a way to forgive him so I could move forward and not get fixated on myself and the situation. So I just pretty quickly, as a teenager, just decided to forgive the child that he once was, recognizing that he came from a place that I didn't, and I don't understand his story, and tried to have grace with the child he must have been. And I haven't really been able to do that for the person he is today. That's kind of what enabled me to be a collaborator and challenger. I stayed focused on following the emerging narrative, challenging counter narratives that would come up, and trying to connect dots so the professionals who knew how to work the system could protect the children, which was ultimately my goal, was to challenge every counterpoint, every anything that stood in the way of protecting kids, because I didn't want it to keep happening. So I also healed pretty quickly by kind of being in nature. I grew up in rural America, and I'm kind of, farming, harvesting pork, all kinds of random people don't really do anymore. I grew up doing those things, but I was really used to uncharted territory, like surprises, nature's course. I was really comfortable with how beautiful and devastating nature can be. I'm really curious about nature's designs, kind of recognizing for what they are. They're incredibly intricate, they're harsh, and they're really beyond my control. So I pretty quickly realized that what had happened to me was just unfortunately a part of nature and natural behavior, and forgave myself and looked to nature to help me forgive myself and let go. I also grew up in a pretty real family connected to farming, and they've always been really real with us. Like, death was a real thing. I remember I physically helped bury my grandfather when I was a kid. I went to every wake, every funeral. I was encouraged to be sad. That it was named. It was being sad, being mad, doing hard things was something that was integral to my life as a child. So I didn't shy away from those things. Kind of similarly, I was raised to be super honest with myself and my family. I grew up in a farming community with immigrants, foresters, mill workers, watermen. We have 2 indigenous tribes with reservations very close to my community. And I really always heard their stories in multiple ways from multiple perspectives. So that really informed my ability to just say what had happened, embrace it by being in nature, and then also being really patient with being lost. I often as a kid would just go wander through the countryside, and I knew where rivers were, I knew where fields were, I would go get lost, but I always knew that I could orient myself and find myself again. So I was really comfortable knowing that was a natural thing. Um, I'm comfortable with being lost. I'm okay with that. And that was really helpful as a kid, kind of moving through these things. I also heal by doing things. I'm not, this is actually awkward for me. I'm not a big talker. I move through, I'm a maker, I'm a doer. So I try to just heal by doing. And I think part of my process was I never really had a big picture. I just took the next best step I could figure out given the resources that I had and the patterns that I was recognizing. So what am I still living with today? I think about this all the time in small ways and big ways. I think recently some of the big high profile cases with USA Gymnastics, Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, um, I recognize that I personally have less to do with the outcome of this case. And I really do think who he was has a lot more to do with why we moved through this case at the speed we did. I mean, he was an immigrant. He's incredibly talented. He's incredibly smart, but he doesn't have a lot of social connections. Everything he built independently. And once that world started to crumble, everything around him crumbled pretty quickly. It took a while to chip away at it, but it happened. The system worked for us. And I don't think it's because we were any more clever than anybody else. I think it has more reflective of who he was and is. I'm constantly looking through social media and news, trying to figure out where he's coaching, where he's teaching, trying to sort out and measure, should I send PSA, should I request a PSA, what's going on, what's he involved with. I continually try to be patient with adults. I sometimes see the world through the eyes of a child, and I get frustrated when adults aren't willing to do adult things and put that burden on children. I think that's one thing that I am fast to recognize. When hard things emerge, I really get frustrated when the adults don't jump in and be part of the solution. And that's just something that I try to balance and be patient with adults and recognize that we're all one's children and have grace. And ultimately, I maintain hope. I have a beautiful family. I have incredible friends. I grew up in an amazing community, and they all, along with nature, have helped me navigate the world. They gave me great examples of how to establish my own sense of direction and how to set up boundaries. They've taught me to always be honest, always be kind, and never to hurt other people. I think those things are what always told me I had to do something, I had to act, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. I just did the next best thing I could realize was possible. They always insisted I see the world as it is, not as I want it to be. And that control is an illusion and that hope persists even against overwhelming odds. My parents were behind me 100% of the way. They let me guide all of it. They were amazing. They are amazing. And I was drawn to the ballet because I love to learn, and I was always able to refine my learning. And it taught me the power of expression. And I think the biggest irony is everything I learned in my ballet training, I think was critical in my ability to move through this. I don't even know at this point, 30 plus years of dealing with this. So, it's not who I am. It doesn't define me, but it informs me every single day. And there you have it.
Thank you so much for sharing your pain and your healing. And this is not a forum in which you're able to see people's faces, but I'm sure that we have all been transfixed, and you've just made so very real all of the steps of your journey and your approach to healing and sharing your insights about connections to life and living and going forward in this world. And thank you also for sharing with us your work to protect other potential victims. And we're a little bit into the next time segment, but I just wonder for a minute if there is anything in particular in your experience that you found about someone in the legal profession or connected with a court that was particularly helpful to you, or something that, a person might not, think about in the right way, and so should avoid in working with someone who's suffered an experience like yours that you'd like to share with us?
I think one quick bit of advice that was always helpful me was the people always implied to me they understood how I felt. They never questioned how I felt. And the circumstances and the details of it, I mean, I was young and it was really hard. So they never pressed me to be like completely accurate 100% of the time. Like we worked through those things, but they always 150% said, I understand how you feel. I can't internalize how you feel, but like I believe how you feel. And that mattered.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we wish you continued strength and healing and power in your work. And so at this point, Joe, I think that you have a code to display.
I do.
Okay, we're still just seeing, okay, here we go. There is the CLE code number 1, Eagle. Thank you, Joe. Our next speaker is Lael Hill. Ms. Hill is the visionary behind the Indiana Coalition for Crime Victims' Rights and the executive director at Mental Health America of Hendricks County in Indiana. She brings a wealth of experience to her roles. With over 15 years of direct and macro social work practice, Ms. Hill has dedicated her career to serving vulnerable populations, communities, and policymakers. She has worked as a rape crisis community advocate and as the lead victim advocate for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, roles which equipped her with skills in community organizing, crisis intervention, advocacy, government affairs, and crime victims' rights. She will tell us more about her life and her experience, which is extensive in every way, and I would invite her to take the floor now. Lael Hill?
Hi, how's it? I hope everyone's doing. I know there's several people on this call. So typically I would ask how everyone's doing, but we probably don't have too much time to have a lot of interaction with the audience, but that's okay. I say that because 1 in 3 women are a victim of sexual assault in our country, and 1 in 6 men are a victim of sexual assault in our country. So statistically, I know that a lot of the audience members may also be survivors too. So I strongly urge you guys to practice self-care and self-love today as you hear your stories. So I really appreciate being here. My name is Lael, that was mentioned. It's like Gail with an L, and I'm a victim advocate, and I'm also a survivor. So my story starts about 1992 when my mother sent me away from my home in San Diego, California, to live with my single father parent in a rural town in Michigan. And growing up as a kid, in about the 4th grade, not having a mother, I didn't really have an adult figure in my life to talk to me about healthy relationships and boundaries and things like that. So I did find myself being re-victimized several times throughout my childhood by several different perpetrators. I'm not going to get too much into that survivor story today in the details. I'm going to share a little bit about what happened, but really talk about more about my advocacy work and what lawyers can do to help survivors. The first time I was sexually assaulted was 4th through 6th grade by a neighborhood boy. At the time, I actually thought that that's just what boys did. So I didn't really understand. Of course, I didn't report that. You know, when you're a kid, you really don't know what your rights are to your own body. So then next in high school, I was raped by a friend after a night of drinking. and which was traumatic for me. A lot of survivors like myself, and as your previous survivor, oftentimes are victimized by somebody we know. And it's more common to be victimized by somebody you know than somebody you don't know. And then in 2012, so years later, I was sexually assaulted in a bar bathroom when after I had been drinking. So, you can see there was some vulnerability there. And it's interesting that I used drinking to cope with my trauma, which led to more assaults. And I'm going to say first that drinking has really little to do with sexual assault. It's not really the cause of it. The cause of it is perpetrators abusing women. But it did make me particularly vulnerable in the bathroom. This person kind of busted through the bar bathroom and assaulted me. At this point, so what happened after that changed my career and my life really for the better, because at that time I was just graduating with a degree in social work and I already was becoming a pretty good advocate. And so I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe I was assaulted again. What is wrong with me? How does this keep happening to me? But then I found out that it's actually pretty common for victims to be re-victimized. So what I actually did after I was assaulted in 2012 is I took the liberty to file a police report. I had been felt so guilty and upset with my younger self for not going to the police before. And there's many reasons for that. And that could be a whole nother training on why victims don't report. But this time I was really empowered to go to the police station and file a report. I told my husband about what happened and, he supported me, and I just wanted to go to the police department by myself and report what had happened the night before. I have children at home, so I didn't want to contact the police and have them come to my house. And what happened next is incredibly egregious and what a lot of victims go through. The police officer in Brownsburg Police, where I live, well, first, the department sent me outside, and she said that a patrol officer would come take my report. And so I waited in a parking lot. First, victims should never wait in a parking lot. There should be a trauma-informed interview room for victims to share their story. But so I'm standing in there in the parking lot by myself, and a patrolman comes up, and I felt off. He didn't have a pen and paper in his hand. He just kind of walked up to me and asked what was going on. It takes a lot of courage for a victim to report these things to the police. So I was already scared and intimidated by this police officer. And essentially what he said was that he rolled his eyes at me. He said, you do know if you are lying, you could be prosecuted. So at that point, I was scared and I just froze, as that's what you do. I froze in the bathroom the night before when I was assaulted, and I was freezing again when I was being re-victimized. And I told him, how can I be prosecuted when I'm the one that was victimized? And he said, it's going to be your word against his. And, this county does prosecute, people that lie about these things. And I told him, I said, but I'm not lying, and he said, well, that doesn't matter much. And I said, well, I really want to file this police report, but gosh, I don't want to be prosecuted for this. And he said, I said, what do you think? He said, if you want my advice, don't drink in a bar with men. That's what he told me. That was his advice. And I just kind of was stunned, and I just left, and actually after thinking about it, wrote him an email on how his response to me was incredibly unprofessional and egregious, and really left it at that. Well, it happened to be a couple years later, I got into the role of victim advocate with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which was really a blessing for me. So I started to learn a lot about victims' rights and the criminal court process. And from there, I founded the Indiana Coalition for Crime Victims' Rights because I realized really quick that what happened to me is pretty common with victims, not just in Indiana, but across the state. And that I started to learn that victims really do have rights, including the right to be treated with dignity and respect. That's a right. We obviously have a right to report the crimes that happen to us. And then I realized that just because we have rights doesn't mean that they can be enforced. So when I started my career as a victim advocate in 2014, I was a little naive because I just assumed, well, no, they can't do that. Victims have a right to attend hearings for the person that hurt them. They have a right to restitution, the right to confer with the prosecutor's office. And then I found that those rights were being violated left and right in Indiana. And so I actually formed a partnership, or a very strong relationship rather, with the National Crime Victims Law Institute. And I thought, how, as a social worker, because I'm a social worker now at this point and an advocate, how can I work with attorneys to enforce victims' rights? Because I found myself, kind of in the criminal court system as an advocate, not a lawyer. So I was very vulnerable, right? So it wasn't uncommon for some prosecutors to say, well, you just don't know, you're not a lawyer, And so I said, correct. I'm not a lawyer, but I know some great lawyers, and this is what they tell me, and this is what we should do. So from there, I founded the Indiana Coalition for Crime Victims' Rights. We were the first victims' rights organization in the state of Indiana to represent victims across all 92 counties, which was really important because there was a lot of counties in Indiana that did not have a victim service organization or victim advocates within their prosecutor's office. So that was really important to me. This work was more therapeutic for me personally than getting therapy, because everyone pushes you to get therapy. But listen, that, there is funding for rape survivors to get free therapy, but therapy is not always the answer. For some people like myself, helping others and getting justice for others is what's really empowering and what really heals me. I can't get justice for myself, but if I can get justice, or even just help and believe another survivor, then it is incredibly healing for me. And so from there, I found, working with Meg Garvin at National Crime Victims Law Institute, I came across their legal library and their technical assistance. And so I would ask them, is one thing I submitted, one question I submitted, can a victim attend the hearing for the rapist who was a juvenile? I had a case where the rapist was a juvenile, and the prosecutor had said, because this is juvenile court, victims' rights don't stand. And that wasn't exactly true. And the interesting thing about that was that the prosecutor represents the state of Indiana, as you guys know, and not the victim itself. And so they're going to do what's in the best interest of the state, not the victim. And so this is where I found victims' rights attorneys to be very helpful. And NCVLI, they put together a legal team, and I think it took about 4 months to put together a legal memorandum on the law and what the laws in Indiana says. And basically it stated that, these laws and a victim's rights to attend the hearings of their offender are a go, right? And it says, yes, victims can in fact attend the hearing of their offender, even if they're in juvenile. Now, this is what gets interesting. The prosecutor disagreed. The defense attorney is going to disagree. They're going to do what's in best interest of their client. But the whole thing is that if you get a victim's rights attorney, victims aren't a party to the case. But because victims have standing to assert their rights in criminal court, you can get a victims' rights attorney or use this memorandum to file a motion on behalf of the victim asserting their victim's rights, because victims do have standing in Indiana in criminal court to assert their rights. And so we decided, let it be up to the judge to make this decision based on the interpretation of the laws in Indiana. And unfortunately, Indiana does not have victims' rights attorneys that practice in criminal court. I don't think it's a practice that is taught much in law school. Maybe if you guys attended a law school where you took victims' rights legal classes, then I think that's great. But victims' rights attorneys are very rare in Indiana. So I had to use the memorandum from NCVLI and present it to the prosecutor. And luckily, the prosecutor gave it a green light, and the victim was able to attend the hearings of the perpetrator. So that's kind of a little bit of the background. I have several other cases, but I just wanted to share a little bit about my story, but also how important pro bono legal services are to survivors, and the power of the work that lawyers can have when they partner with social workers and working with victims, because the social worker can provide them with resources, emotional support, connect them to therapy, and the lawyers can assert their rights in criminal court. And so NCVLI, they do a lot of pro bono. I mean, I consider it pro bono work because I didn't get charged for that legal memorandum. And that was oh gosh, I don't know how many hours, hundreds of hours of lawyers getting together to do this work for victims. And so I'm very grateful for them. If you're not familiar with NCVLI, National Crime Victims Law Institute, I definitely encourage you to visit their website. And Joe, I'll send you these resources as well and some examples of their work, but they have a great law library on victims' rights, and they do technical assistance. That's the work that they gave to me. So do I have time, a few minutes left just to wrap up? I haven't been keeping track of the time, but.
Yep, we have a little over a minute.
Okay, great. So to summarize, it's really important. I have so many more examples of my work with attorneys and pro bono work, but it's also pro bono work is very important because I don't believe that victims should have to pay for any type of legal services in criminal court. And they really need lawyers that will be their victims' rights attorney through criminal court. But also on the civil side, pro bono is really important to help them seek protective orders in civil court. I've seen amazing work in Indiana from attorneys that handle the civil side of protective orders pro bono for free, no charge for victims. And pro bono legal works not just is helpful and it helps have victims seek justice, but it also saves lives. It really does save lives. So if you're offering pro bono work on victims' rights, a victim's rights to be safe, or a civil protective order side, then you're going to save lives. So it's really important. And the last thing I'll say is I'm still doing this work, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of lawyers on this call from across the country, so I don't want to overwhelm myself, but I'm very dedicated to this work because, like I said, it really helps me heal as a survivor. And so if you guys have more questions about the role or the teamwork that social workers and advocates can play with lawyers to serve victims, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will give Joe my contact information. So I'm going to wrap things up, and hopefully we have some time left at the end of this call for questions and comments. But thank you guys so much. Such an honor to be here and to share my story and talk with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Hill, for sharing your story and also for giving us such a concrete picture of how lawyers and advocates and people in the legal profession can be helpful, and also about how victims' dignity and vulnerability needs to be respected in encounters. And so you've taught us so very much today, and I appreciate the way that you have opened up. Unfortunately, because of the number of people who are on this call, we won't be able to take questions afterward, but I'll look forward to seeing your contact information and the information about the organization in the chat. And I do encourage people to follow up on your really inspiring presentation. So thank you.
Thank
Take
you so
care.
much.
And so we'll now turn to our next speaker, who is Ginger T. Rex. She's an accomplished actress and a writer. She recently published the anthology, We've Been Put Through Fire and Come Out Divine, Stories of Hope and Survival. Ms. Rex works with many organizations, sharing her story in hopes it will help others navigate the victim's side of the complicated justice system. Her wish is to help create a clearer path for victims seeking justice. Ms. Rex, the floor is yours. Ginger Rex, have you made it onto the Teams call?
She is on the call, Your Honor. Trying to see if she's muted. Yes. Ms.
So,
Rex, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you unmute her as administrator?
No, it's not allowing me to. I'm going to try something. Give me one moment. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I don't understand why she's muted, Your Honor.
Well, let's see, she shouldn't be on the phone. Someone has put in the chat that if, Ms. Rex, if you're on the phone, you can self-unmute by pressing *6, but I expect you're on a video connection.
She may have had some sort of technical difficulties because she's no longer here. She
right.
may be logging back in. This might be a good time, Your Honor, to show the second code.
Yes, let's show the second code. The second code is now on the screen for CLE. That code is FLAG, F-L-A-G, and the people who are seeking CLE credit should have some sort of email address for their state authority. And Joe, am I correct that they are to email this code word to that state authority email address?
That is correct.
All right, so putting it in the chat's not going to help. You have to find the right email address for your state CLE authority and email the code words to that authority. Second one is FLAG. The first one was EAGLE. And so, Joe, can you see whether Ms. Rex has come back on yet?
She has, and she's unmuted.
Can you hear
wonderful.
Me now?
Yes. So
okay.
Welcome, Ms. Rex. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. I don't know what was going on. I could hear you all fine and decided just to leave and sign back in, and that seemed to work. So let's see my time. I don't think I have as much time, so I'm going to make this quick. I wanted to thank you all for being here today. I would have loved to have met some of you back when I was experiencing my many decades dealing with a police department that took the call the night something awful happened to me. I was also about the same age as the other two speakers. I had survived a very traumatic, horrible childhood, and by the skin of my teeth and making good choices, ended up in college. But one night I was home alone, cleaning and studying. I was a biochem major, and someone broke in. He had actually broken in 1 month prior and taken from me and my 3 roommates pictures of us, clothes from our dirty underclothes baskets. And the police officer that night said, "This is weird. This is bad weird, and you should move." I didn't have the money to move, and my roommates didn't want to, so we stayed. So 1 month later, what turned out to be a serial attacker, a serial rapist, broke in, and I was home alone. He attacked me, and my roommates came home. They were screaming and upset and called the police. Of course, the police came. He took with him that night the knife that he brought, duct tape, lots of evidence. There was fabric that he brought. There was lots of fingerprints, lots of evidence. And the detective brought probably anywhere from 10 to 15 police officers all throughout my home and the back, this home that we rented, where he had run out the back door. I went to the hospital and had the rape kit performed. And so from that night on, and I think I took a different, or maybe a lot of people take this stance, but I was angry and I wanted justice. And I was very sure that would happen. I was thinking, you know, I did my part of it. I want to partner with you. Let's get him. I wanted my day in court. I wanted the judge and or a jury to say, that's the face, that's the guy, he did it. And as years went on, it became very difficult to manage that. And I, you know, just called the police constantly. Do you have any leads? What's going on? And they mostly didn't return my phone calls at all. And after about a year, at that young age, I just had to start to accept that maybe I wasn't going to get justice. It's difficult to do that when, you know, you still have this core belief that that was the one thing I wanted in my life, maybe in an unhealthy way, where I just really thought one day. After several years, I still live in the same state, and we had a case where there was a serial rapist that was caught with over 100 victims spanning several states. And I saw that on the news, and the MO, the timeline, everything fit so closely with what happened to me that I called the police that were investigating this case. They recommended I call the place where I had reported and been unable to get justice. The PD is probably 4 hours away from the city where he was committing most of the attacks. They wouldn't call me back. And so I was just in a conundrum where the police that caught him couldn't help me, and the police that I reported to weren't calling me back. And I was making trips down there, and they wouldn't, you know, they just, I think, were putting me off, but in a way that they just would say things like, well, we're looking for your report. There's a broken microfilm reader, things like that. So I finally contacted a neighbor of mine in a different city and said, your husband works for the FBI and he oversees this large area, and I know that FBI has this case now. Could he help me? He became, and two people from the FBI who are now retired, some of my very best friends. And one of them helped start VICAP, which is a part of the FBI that helps communication between and among states, which you may be aware of what they do. All of this is sort of, sorry, I'm not as familiar with it all. Otherwise, I probably would have called a pro bono lawyer back then. But at the time, they were very helpful in trying to get justice for me. They also believed that this was the person, but they needed my file. For 2 years, I contacted that police department when they had a person, we had the FBI, and I couldn't even get my file. I contacted Susana Martinez, who at the time was our district attorney and became our governor. And she said there wasn't enough evidence and they couldn't reopen the case. With all that evidence, I just found it very hard to believe there wasn't enough evidence. So a CBS reporter contacted me, finally filed a FOIA, made them fix that microfilm machine. I got my report, and it turns out that detective had signed off on destroying all of my evidence within a year of the attack, with an aggravated rape charge and a kidnapping charge, and obviously a serial rapist that broke in. It just seemed, it shocked the FBI agents. They said, this doesn't happen. Like, you don't destroy this, you don't close this. So it was a gift in a way. I got to go back to not knowing and focusing on my life. And I think I'd done a lot of work as far as healing. They say, how do you heal? Well, I can do hard things. I can do a lot of hard things. I have a lot of self-discipline. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood in Albuquerque, which is really saying something. And that'll give you a tough skin, a thick skin. And I learned a lot of things that have helped me in a way that probably finding the rapist wouldn't have, because after that, I learned that the state's rape laws are so weak. He might have only done about 6 years for that attack had I had my day in court. So my message would be one thing or several things that would be helpful. The night of the attack, a young lady came to the hospital, a volunteer, grateful she was there, very sweet of her. I have a very strong personality and I was angry. So she was very upset about what had happened to me and was crying. And for me, I thought, I need someone strong. Like, give me a card. Give me the name of a pro bono lawyer that can help me navigate all this. I want to get him. That if you have a victim like that, I mean, having that card would have been more beneficial. I know where to get counseling. And it was, very sweet and very helpful. But to have had some sort of resource that right now, when I went on doing research for this speaking opportunity, I did look at NCVI or LI and VCA. My state really has not much. It probably would be the same if I went to do that today. But if there was something more, nationwide, more of a one-stop place that you could pair pro bono lawyers with victims, I think that'd be a gift, because most of these, if you'll read John Krakauer's book, Missoula, you can learn a lot about the toll that rape does take on young women and sometimes men's lives, even the people that are accused, and the back and forth. Like, everyone's life changes in a negative way. You change majors, you change colleges, you move. I was a biochemistry major, switched to a much less lucrative major at a different college. And of course, I'm an actor now, which that doesn't pay as well as biochemistry might have. But anyway, it changes things. It derails your life, and lost a lot of sense of security, and that can derail your life when you're thinking about going out in the world and doing things. The other issue are the laws. Obviously, my state, I did try to leave the system better than I found it. I tried, after finding out my evidence was destroyed, going to my local representative, the local sexual assault services director, local DA, and a couple of other victims advocates out of the Capitol. And we had a meeting, and I was trying to change 2 of the laws in our state, because right now you can get more time in the state of New Mexico for taking a man's cow out of his pasture than raping his wife. And a 22-year-old can give drugs and alcohol to a minor and rape her, and they say they have nothing to do. There's no way to prosecute. It probably wouldn't be prosecuted because she was intoxicated. Well, she's intoxicated because someone older gave her alcohol and drugs. But we have some of the weakest laws in our country, in my state, and I was unable to change the laws. I was unable to reach people. I was unable to get calls back. And I'm an articulate person that knows a lot of people. I'm resourceful. At the time, I think I was a resourceful, intelligent person, and had no idea that a pro bono lawyer could have been an option for me to say, hey, the police aren't calling me back. Why? Why can't I get justice? I did what I was supposed to do. This is very clear. There were fingerprints on the doors. Like, there were things, and they destroyed them, and they weren't processed. And I know that things have changed a little bit in the time since that happened to me. But at the time, there was DNA. There were obviously fingerprints and all of the things that could help a person have closure. So my closure now comes from my faith, living a good life, and making myself stronger in all those areas where I could have gone weaker. And that's been a gift I gave to myself, not the rapist did not give that to me. So I think the most important thing that people could take away from what I'm trying to say is statistically, a lot of these rapists are repeat offenders. And if we can do things to help victims get justice and then strengthen the laws so they're behind bars, you might see a huge difference in the number of rapes and the incidents that this even goes on, because a lot of the same people are doing a lot of the same things. I mean, this guy, 100 victims, and it was that difficult to put him behind bars. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. I think we're getting close to finishing up. So I will turn it back over to the Honorable Laura Swain.
Thank you, Ms. Rex. Thank you for sharing your stories and your fight, and for making clear how deep the need is for people to work with victims in advocacy in their own cases, and also the gaps that you found in advocacy on the legislative and political side. So I think you've given us a lot of inspiration. Thank you very much. And folks, the program is not nearly over, because we have another speaker Our final speaker is Brenda Golden. Ms. Golden is an enrolled citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation, a lawyer and outspoken activist, advocate, and seeker of justice for Native people. She's presented oral testimony before the United States Congress and State Department, and testimony in writing to the UN Permanent Forum, and has engaged in a wide range of advocacy. And so I am now going to turn the floor over to Brenda S. Golden.
She is here. Much like Ms. Rex, she seems to be muted as
Oh,
well.
I'm here.
Oh, there she
Excuse
is.
me.
All
There.
right.
Hello,
Keep
Ms.
trying to
Golden.
say I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
Hello,
all right.
everyone. Trying to share my PowerPoint with you. If you just give me just a minute, I wanted to present to you a presentation on the
Brenda, would you like for me to turn it on, the PowerPoint?
yes, please.
I can run
That
it,
would
sure.
work.
No problem.
I don't know how to share. I don't know how to do that. So as Judge Swain said, I'm Muskogee Creek from Okmulgee, Oklahoma. And today I wanted to talk with you a little bit about Indian country. If you would go to the next slide, please, or if I can do that. We're going to cover, what is Indian country, how prevalent it is, domestic violence is here in Indian country. What are the challenges writing pro bono work in Indian country, and some of the legal services that are needed. And then also I'll give you a few tips if you are so inclined to try to help someone in our community. So let's talk a little bit about what is Indian country, first of all. And there is a definition. I am an attorney, so that is why this is geared more towards legal work than social work. I apologize for that. But the United States Code 1151 describes or defines Indian country as first an Indian reservation, and there are 362 reservations in the United States. Some geographically are huge, like the Navajo Nation that covers a couple of states, New Mexico and Arizona. And then there are smaller ones, like here in Oklahoma, that are just like 35 miles wide. So you have a wide variety of reservations, and reservations are basically land that's set aside for Native American use, and their issuance of any kind of trust land or fee land resides within that geographical boundary. It also covers dependent Indian communities, which here in Oklahoma, we have some tribal towns that organized under the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act, and that is where these would fall in dependent Indian community. And of course, Indian allotments are those that were given to individual Native people in beginning in the 1800s, the late 1800s. Each head of household got 160 acres, and each child got 40 acres, and those are considered Indian country. Let's go to the next slide, please. So there is a really huge problem with domestic violence in Indian country. And when I talk about Indian country, it isn't just those three places that I talked about as defined in USC 1151, because we're all over the place, and so it can happen anywhere in one of our communities. More than 4 in 5 American Indians will have some kind of violence in their lifetime. 52% of Native American women will be physically abused during their lifetime, and 40% of murder victims are killed by their intimate partners. The biggest issue for our female victims are that
Ms. Golden, you are muted, and so if you'd unmute, don't know how that happened.
I don't
There.
either.
You're unmuted now.
Have I been talking all this time to?
No,
to
no,
my-
no. It was just for a second. I don't know why that happened, but thank you.
Okay. So Going back to some of the statistics, the 84.3% of Native American women will be subjected to physical violence in their lifetime, and 81.6% of Native American men are subjected to violence, physical violence in their lifetime. So this is a really large, huge problem that we don't have the resources to deal with a lot of times. Again, I mentioned the space, like the Navajo Nation. Some of the resources in our Indian country are very far apart and far and few in between. So getting that medical care or legal services for someone in that situation is very, very hard. So you might ask, why don't we help ourselves? I mean, why can't we help ourselves with these legal services if we live in this community? For one thing, Joe, can you go to the next slide? There are more than 1.3 million attorneys in the United States, and only 0.5% are Native American. And even less than that are female Native American attorneys. So the number of Native American attorneys basically want to fight for justice. They want to work for their tribe, or they want to work for tribal sovereignty. None of us sign up to do pro bono work for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. That's just not what we go to law school for. In fact, I got the certificate in federal Indian law. I didn't want to do the domestic violence and sexual assault work either. And it just so happens I'm now in private practice, and it happens quite frequently that I do take on cases. So most of the Native Americans in law school want to focus on Indian law. They're not trying to focus on family law or domestic violence or individual rights. They're focusing on tribal sovereignty or how they can help their tribe. And that's in fact what I went to law school for, or why I went to law school. So, we don't have enough numbers to help all of those people that are in the situations that they are. When we talk about all these victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, there's just not enough attorneys that are Native American to help each and every one. And in fact, some of those reservations, like I mentioned, may not have any Native American lawyers on the whole reservation because of our small numbers. So we need everyone out there to help us. And that's why I'm here today to tell why this is such a problem and such an issue for us in Indian country that I wanted to share with you these statistics. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the problems or challenges in Indian country is that up until the Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized, tribal governments didn't have the ability to prosecute non-Native offenders. And over 80% of the perpetrators that commit a violent act against Native American or American Indian people are non-Natives. And so that caused a huge gap. If it's a major crime, the federal government can prosecute, but the tribe cannot prosecute a non-Native. Since the Violence Against Women's Act was reauthorized, there is a provision called Special Domestic Violence Courts, and you have to apply and go through a special process to get certified in that way. My tribe, the Muskogee Creek Nation, has received that designation, so we can prosecute non-Native offenders for domestic violence and sexual assault now under that. But not very many tribes have gone that route to get that designation. So we still have this problem of non-Native offenders being able to commit violence and not being held accountable for it in a court of law or being prosecuted in the justice system. The other thing is that all of us Native Americans have some form of intergenerational trauma, not only from forced removals and boarding schools, which taught us that if we spoke up, that we would be punished, but also because we have cycles of violence in our own homes and in our own communities. And it's extremely hard if you are in a family situation, and in this community, we all know each other and we know our families. And that's one of the first things we ask when we meet somebody is, who's your mother? Who's your father? You know, and we know somebody that knows somebody, or we're related to them. And a lot of times you don't want to speak up because you don't want to hurt the family, or you don't want to cause a ripple in the community. And so we have all of these cycles of violence that just keeps coming around. And a lot of times they're not even reported. And people in the family know about it and just go on about their business. It happens in front of them. Well, it happened to me, so it doesn't matter. It happens to her or him. And so that's how the cycle continues. And it's very hard to break that cycle. And another challenge is the jurisdiction. I mentioned that we can't prosecute non-native offenders unless you have the special domestic violence designation in your tribal court. But if it doesn't happen on tribal land, and it's not native, then the state court has to prosecute them, which again, you might have a challenge getting the district attorney or the prosecutor to take up the case. And then sometimes there have been cases where the boundary line, half of I'm sure you probably know some of these boundaries don't go straight down a county line or something. So there's a lot of confusion about who's got the jurisdiction to prosecute, or who's got the law enforcement authority to investigate. And a lot of cases fall through the cracks because they don't know whose land it was. And if it's a non-native offender against a native, you have to go through all these steps. Where was it? Who did it? And so we have a lot of cases that fall through the cracks. That causes a lot of issues, because if one of the victims' sisters or brothers or somebody says, well, hey, this person reported it and nothing happened, so I'm not going to report what happened to me either, because nothing's going to happen. And that again goes towards the cycle of violence that continues in this community. And the other thing is that a lot of these cases have an underlying issue of alcoholism or substance abuse. And as you can see, we have a high rate of Native Americans that have substance abuse disorders. That also goes back to some of the trauma that has been prevalent in our communities. But it's also, different in different reservations and different communities. Those rates are either higher or lower. Some places are not, but one of the underlying issues in a lot of these domestic violence and sexual assault cases are the use of alcohol or substance. Next slide, please. The lack of resources in our communities is very profound. The Indian Health Service is greatly underfunded, and a lot of our people don't have the financial means to have their own medical providers. They don't have insurance, and so we don't have the way to get them treated for medically. If they have a sexual assault, they don't get a rape kit taken or a SANE test right away. They might have to travel a long way, and then that degrades the evidence. A lot of the treatment centers here in Oklahoma have gone out of business. There's just we have to send our citizens to California to get substance abuse treatment. There's only 2 or 3 here in Oklahoma that actually have treatment centers that are not for profit. There's also a lack of family involvement. I mentioned the cycle of violence, and parents that have exhibited violence aren't the ones that their children are going to want to go to say, this is happening to me, because they know that their parents have gone through it as well, and it's not something that they want to discuss with them. Sometimes their parents don't even take it seriously. They're like, well, what did you do to make him hit you? What did you do to make him treat you that way, or treat you that way? So there's some really, really big challenges that we have to overcome if we're going to provide services for our members.
Ms. Golden?
Yes.
I'm sorry, if I just wanted to interrupt and say we have about 1.5 minutes left.
Okay, I think I have 1 slide left.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now some of you may wonder, I mentioned myself that there's not very many female attorneys, and I don't practice in this area because I'm a victim of domestic violence, and I tried myself to provide services, and it triggers some of the memories that I had from 9 years being in a violent relationship. So that's one thing that also deters Native American attorneys. Also, some of the things that you have to do if you want to help is like make no judgments. People need to just go in with their eyes open. And yes, I would be willing to share my slides. And never promise more than you can give. The thing is with the violent background that a lot of us have is that if you have to help somebody find a treatment center, if you have to help them find medical services, that's outside my legal realm, but I have to do it because there's nobody else to do it. And it takes a lot of time, takes away from your business, and it takes away from other things. So you have to be really committed to doing this if you're going to provide pro bono services. And it could take it could take a lot of your own understanding, and you have to know all the laws. So I'm going to just wrap up there because I know we're running short on time. I'd be more than happy to share these slides and this presentation with anyone. Joe, if you want to email that to anyone that requests it, I'm happy that people are interested. And thank you for your time and attention today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Golden. You've opened our eyes to a lot of needs and particular challenges, and we're very grateful. So I want to thank all of our speakers, Trina Clemens, Lael Hill, Ginger Rex, and Brenda Golden, for sharing their own stories and the work they're doing to uphold, empower, and protect women and girls. Thank all of you for attending. There are almost 350 people on this program today, and I know that others will watch the recording. Thank you all for devoting time to this important information and important inspiration. I do hope that today's program has inspired some of you to seek out opportunities for pro bono service in the areas of domestic violence and advocacy for safety and equality, and also to look into the particular needs of Indigenous communities. Take care, stay safe, and be well, everyone. Bye-bye. And thank you, Joe.
Thank you.